how astrology told me that Trump was going to win the election, Harris was going to lose, and what is coming next for not just America, but the world in general. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Phoenician Priestess. Okay, this video is as a result of some votes that happened on my poll and my Instagram stories. So to catch you up, if you don't follow me on Instagram, before the election, I predicted and I was sure 100% that Trump was going to win the election. After the election, I posted my second video on this channel. Go ahead and check it out if you haven't yet. It's about love, and I love love, and big changes are coming this month, so go watch it. But anyway, I posted the second video, and then afterwards, I posted a poll on if people would want me to make a video about how I 100% knew Trump was going to win this election because of astrology, and what I actually see happening next for the US and as the world overall, which is absolutely massive, truly monumental change that may come in the form of chaos. And I posted that poll if people wanted that video, or if people wanted me to keep the topic solely on things that are personal, like love and money and finance and career and intimacy and passion and things like that. And overwhelmingly, the vote was to make this video. So before I start, I want to say that this is purely a video from an objective perspective, from me as a professional astrologer, and the abilities of forecasting and, in a way, prophecy and seership that astrology can give me. It is not anything to do with my opinion or my commentary, and it's not in any way talking about either side. It's just purely objective. I also want people to see and understand truly how powerful astrology is, in not just predictive wise, but and understanding the currents that are underlying all of the energy collectively and within us, and to understand if this could be a reason why the media overall tries to dumb down the perspective of astrology, and official institutions want to take away the power of astrology, so that individuals themselves, in a way, do not know what power they have access to at their fingertips. And this way you can also understand why leaders in all ancient civilizations, at least in the East Mediterranean, the Fertile Crescent, the Levant, a lot of leaders, whether it was kings, emperors, generals, use astrology. And I've read for CEOs, COOs, VPs of very big companies. So, you know, that quote about the powerful and the very wealthy using astrology is true. And I hope this video can show you that. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to jump into why. So the stars are really aligning in ways we haven't seen for centuries, marking pivotal shifts not only in the US, but also globally. Let's get into what the cosmos is revealing about where we're headed, because these are incredibly powerful transits. By the way, check the description box below if you want to skip ahead to certain sections. I'll try and put timestamps. I'm going to see how this video plays out. So first, how did I know that Trump was 100% going to win this election? And I'm taking logic out of the picture because logically, as someone who, you know, follows politics and current events, I felt it was leaning this way, but taking it purely objectively as an astrologer, the astrology confirmed it 100%. So let's start with the transits of Jupiter and Uranus in the 10th houses of Trump, and actually Vance as well, his VP. So the 10th house is the house that represents career, it represents public life, it represents standing in society, and it represents authority. We had Jupiter and Uranus entering and transiting both, not just Trump as the president-elect, but also his VP's houses. That's a big deal, and that's kind of double amplifying that because it was both of them that saw this transit. Jupiter is the planet that talks about success, expansion, good luck, and Uranus is the planet that talks about kind of, how do I say this, riling things up, volatility, sudden unexpected shifts. And so when we have Jupiter representing expansion, success, and luck, and magnifying everything it touches, seeing Jupiter in both Trump and Vance's 10th house of public life, authority, career is a big deal. That to me was fully suggesting heightened visibility and purely success when I compared it to what I saw in Kamala Harris's chart. And it also indicated to me unexpected changes in how they're positioned in the public eye. So like I mentioned about Uranus, on the other hand, that's the planet of radical change, disruption, sudden, unexpected shifts. So when it transits something like the 10th house, it can bring sudden shifts in career, reputation, or social status. For Trump and Vance, this to me meant a sudden surge in influence, but also a volatile and potentially divisive impact on their public roles. So the combination of Jupiter's expansive energy with Uranus's unpredictability to me hinted at bold, shocking moves, which could shake up their status quo, and indicated to me expansion, luck, and success in what they were aiming when it came to their career and their standing in society. Now, if you compare this to what is transiting and happening right now in Kamala Harris's chart, it tells a completely different story, which further solidified to me astrologically who would be the winner and who would be the loser. By the way, I used to say, I think I'm even confused now. I used to say Kamala. If I'm probably going to switch up the pronunciations of her name as I keep going through this. So ignore me if I do that. So Vice President Harris's chart, she had Saturn and Neptune transiting that same house I talked about earlier. If you're new to astrology, the 10th house. 10th house, again, just as a reminder, is the house of career, public standing in society, what you give back to society, vocation, reputation, this kind of energy. And she had Saturn and Neptune transiting there. You're probably like, okay, what does that mean? Don't worry, I'm explaining it to you. This brings a very different energy to what I saw in Trump and Vance's chart. Saturn is a planet that represents, people, other astrologers will say, and it's true in different contexts, Saturn is about discipline, it's about responsibility, it's about structure, but Saturn is also about restriction, and Saturn can also bring hardship. It's also the planet associated with karma. So when you see Saturn move through the 10th house, it very often brings lessons, challenges, and a need to answer for past actions, and also obstacles and restriction. Career restrictions, things going wrong, things like that. So with Saturn transiting here, Harris, I could tell, would have felt or seen a sense of restriction or heavy responsibility navigating the changes when it came to career and public standing and things like that. We also had Neptune transiting her 10th house. Neptune, on the other hand, is all about illusions, dreams, spirituality. It can inspire higher vision, but in this context, it can also create confusion or total disillusionment, aka, it is the planet of disillusion, of not seeing things clearly as they are, of seeing idealistically, and that idealism not actually tied to how reality is going to break out. So what does this mean? Together with Saturn and Neptune transiting her 10th house, that indicated to me that Kamala Harris would have been experiencing a mix of idealism that was different than the hard reality in front of her. Like there was some delusion in her stance in terms of how she was tracking and whether or not she was going to win and what had to be done. And there was a misalignment between there. Saturn and Neptune those energies do not mix well together. And Saturn was there to bring restriction. So all of this was pushing her to evaluate her approach to leadership in a different way. But there would have been obstacles happening at the same time. Basically, what's that phrase? The rug pulled from under her feet. That's the energy when you have Saturn and Neptune in her 10th house, is when it came to her career, her standing in society, the rug would have been pulled under her feet. So what's going to happen after? What do I see happening in the US after and in the world as a result overall? Now, I know you probably hear my accent and you hear that I sound like I live in the US, and I mainly do. But I didn't grow up here, and I'm a third culture kid, and I grew up as an expat, and I nomaded full-time for 3.5 years, and I'm a child of immigrants. So it's not like I'm talking about what's happening in the US is impacting the world in a way that is making it the center of the world. It's a purely objective way of understanding the greater landscape of how the US in a way is a big global power and truly does impact the economies, the markets, and the stability of other countries around the world. So purely objectively, what happens here, not in an egocentric view, it does affect other places. So even though for this video, I'm still going to focus on forecasting for the US, but you can understand, I'm going to pull in some of the world stuff here. Okay, so what do I see happening after the election moving into November and December? So November brings two major karmic shifts on a collective and societal level happening at the same time. One is more major in the long sense, and the other is more major in the short-term sense, but that fuels the bigger change happening. So the big change happening is Pluto entering Aquarius. You may have heard this a lot. Pluto is an incredibly slow-moving planet. I think it takes around 14 years to move between each constellation. It's a very slow-moving energy. It's a generational archetypal energy, and so the shifts last a generation. But Pluto, right, is Hades. It's the underworld. It's the darkness, the fear, the gunk that we all stuff beneath us. It's our biggest fears, our biggest worries, our biggest pains, our traumas. But it's also transmuting them. It's the phoenix rising from the ashes. It's forcing us to face our darkness, our demons, and our biggest fears. And it's also the planet that represents power struggles, and all of these big ideals of that shift, transmutation, alchemization, darkness shifting to light, phoenix rising, and struggle and fight for power, I would say as well. Pluto entering Aquarius while it's been in Capricorn is a very big, very big deal. And it's timing right now. This happens on, I believe, November 19th. Let me check that, 19th or 15th. I think it was 19th. My last video has the exact date. I'll put it down in the comments below. Its timing right after the election is absolutely no coincidence at all. At the same time, we have Mars moving into Leo. Mars is the planet of confrontation, aggression, ambition, but also, side note, passion and sex, but that is less related to this video. Mars is moving into Leo. Leo is the archetype associated with leaders, also entrepreneurs, but really leadership and taking charge, and pride, integrity, but also Leo is fiery. Leo is a fire sign, so Leo acts and speaks before it thinks and is very emotionally volatile. And Mars is of course named after the god of war. And so you can imagine with this energy of Pluto entering Aquarius and Mars moving into Leo, these two placements happening at the same time right after an election that doesn't just affect a giant nation, but in a sense, much of the global landscape, creates an incredibly combustible energy, an intense, transformative energy that is unafraid to confront the status quo and to cause a type of chaos. Pluto in Aquarius is signaling a new era, one focused on transmuting darkness to light as a collective, and one focused on saying, okay, we need a change here. Things haven't been working as they were. And Pluto in Aquarius is all about completely deconstructing what's existed the way it has and reconstructing things in an idealistic way that focuses on truly the idealism of humanitarianism and what is right. It really represents a shift towards ideals of equality, reform, freedom, where power is no longer held by a select few, but shared among the collective. This transit, I believe, is marking the beginning of a massive transformation in how society views power structures and how our power structures up till now has been. On top of it, I believe, is marking the start of a change that will play out in the next 10 to 14 years that will lead to change in our structures of government and change in the structures of the power of the government and governing body and how we handle elections and democracy in this country. Possibly changes decentralizing the two parties that is in the two-party system and how it's handled that way. And with this, so even though this is something that is shifting this month, right? Like I said, Pluto is going from the critical degree in Capricorn to Aquarius this month. But on top of it, it's happening at the same time. Mars, the planet of action, of fighting, moves into Leo, adding fuel to this fire. So even though this is something that you will see the repercussions of playing out in the next 10 to 14 years, you will see a lot of these two things happening this month. You're going to see, I don't want to use the word chaos because it scares people, but you're going to see Mars and Leo fueling this fire. Mars in Leo is bold, it's fiery, it's action-oriented, and it's angry. So there's a sense of speaking and acting before thinking, pushing for immediate action, and confronting issues head-on, and being very, very, very confrontational. So this could be happening on both sides. Again, I'm saying this is purely objective. I am not giving my own personal opinion here. Leo's influence is really encouraging assertion of personal opinion when it comes to power, and confidence in asserting a need for change and a want for change. But it really can also stoke tempers and absolutely amplify ego, and it can Mars here can blindly create a blind rage in people's eye. And while Mars is in Leo, it can make it very hard for people to see eye to eye and to connect and to speak like humans. The energy here suggests really intense confrontations. And combining it on the Pluto in Aquarius, it suggests these intense confrontations with society standing up more firmly for what it believes in on either side. The combined energy of Mars in Leo and Pluto in Aquarius could really be a catalyst for a powerful societal shift and awakening people to the need for big change. So I also talked about, if you were reading the Instagram stories that led to this video being made, how this pattern, these transits, these changes, this election, it's part of a bigger picture that is happening to the US and affecting, you can apply what that would unfold to the world after. And so I'm going to talk about it in different ways, but basically there are historical parallels. Okay, how am I gonna? It's a lot. It's a lot of. The U.S. is going to be going through a lot. So the first thing is, besides this election, besides we talked about Pluto, we talked about Mars, the U.S. is experiencing its Pluto return. This is a big. I don't think I can swear on this. And I don't swear that much normally anyway. But this is a big effing deal. The Pluto return. I told you what Pluto means, okay? Pluto is death and rebirth. Pluto is Hades. It's the underworld. Pluto is everything you heard me describing earlier about fears and power and imbalance of power and obsession and trauma and darkness and secrets and corruption and transmuting dark to light and shedding light on the darkness and alchemization and phoenix rising. All of that is Pluto. Pluto return represents the moment when Pluto as a planet, which moves so slowly, returns to its point within the full rotation, which happens every 248 years. So on February 22nd, 2022, which by the way was also the day I released my first book, but that's a side note, on Feb 22nd, 2022, by the way, that also a side note as well, in Chaldean numerology, that day is very significant that this happened, but the US had its Pluto return. Pluto return occurs roughly every 248-ish years, and it signifies a profound death and rebirth cycle for nations. So for the US, its Pluto return marks a period of reckoning, bringing hidden issues, corruption, and power struggles to the surface. And it started in 2022, so 2.5, almost 3 years ago. And like I said, it's a cycle of 248 years, so we're at the beginning. And so when I knew back in 2022 the US was starting its Pluto return, I went into all of my, I know this, I have this underlying knowledge when I look at and see all the other transits happening to the US right now. This is a big deal, and we're just at the beginning of it. So February 22nd, 2022 was just the seed being planted for this next cycle and for this gigantic change that is going to happen in the US. Pluto is the planet of transformation, alchemization, transmutation, and also breaking down things. It's death and rebirth. So it often works by tearing down outdated structures and outdated power mechanisms to make way for something new. So in the US's chart, Pluto represents power, control, and hidden forces within systems like government and finance. Okay, I'm going to say that again so you actually hear what I said. Pluto, when I'm talking about the US's chart and US's Pluto return, represents power, control, and hidden forces within systems like government and finance. Did you hear that? Hidden forces within systems like government and finance. So with Pluto starting its return in 2022, and we are still at the beginning, these systems are forced to face their shadows, which means that unresolved things like this are coming into light. And the citizens, the collective, are being forced to face the shadows within them as they belong to this collective, and the shadows within the government bodies that they have, and are forced to be bringing that to light. This is a time of intense power struggles where long-held systems may crumble or be reformed, right? So power as we know it, government as we've known it in the US, is at the beginning of the crumble of how at least we've known it. I'm not here to spread fear. It's not about that. It doesn't mean bad things are coming. It just means power and how we know it, government and how we know it, systems and how we know it. This is the start of them crumbling and being reformed. And that doesn't just happen by itself. It happens when big things like these shifts happen, when there's societal changes, movements, when there's conflict, when there's confrontations, when there's chaos, and when we're forced to work together as a unit, as a whole. We're being asked to face our nation's collective karma, to acknowledge what's broken, and either transform or dismantle the structures that no longer serve us. To either transform them or to dismantle them. And to do that, it's an Aquarian energy. It's Aquarius. We have to do that together in unity. This is, again, I want to repeat, it's not my personal opinion. I mean, it's my personal interpretation, though, of what is objectively happening astrologically. But it's my opinion as an astrologer and nothing else. This is the interpretation, how I see it, of these transits in the sky. So the next point to understand what's happening in the US and overall and how it all ties together is understanding really gigantic historical parallels. So I talked about how Pluto is playing a big part here, but we also see very similar aspects when it comes to Saturn and when it comes to other and Uranus and other these big, slow, generational, societal shifting planets that has a similarity of what's happening now in the US and in the world that happened at the same time when the Roman Empire fell, when the US went through the US Revolution, when the US had the Civil War, and also similarities with World War I or II, and the Pluto return. So I'm going to quickly just talk about each of those to understand. So basically, TLDR, before I dive into the details, the US and the collective overall, right, because there are different charts for each, is seeing similar astrological transits that do not occur frequently. These are transits that happen some every few decades, some every hundreds of years, that are happening at the same time, that parallel the intense cycles of transformation that happened in pivotal moments in history, such as when the Roman Empire fell, when the US had its Civil War, and when the US had its revolution, and of course the two world wars. So during Rome's decline, when the Roman Empire fell, Pluto and Saturn had very challenging alignments and very challenging aspects, and that echoed the decay of outdated power structures. Like we talked about what Pluto means, Saturn means answering for your karma. Saturn, I talked about that when I was talking about Harris's chart, but it also means obstacles, challenges, and they had challenging aspects, meaning things like squares and oppositions, and these aspects come with friction, with obstacles, and with hardship. But I want to say again, in the all, because these are collective transits, collective planets, these should lead to something good for the collective, even if what we're seeing, on the smaller level is what might look like chaos. So just as we see in the US Pluto return today, this alignment reflected a time when empires faced their shadows. Jupiter and Saturn were also intense aspects, marking the strain between expansion and restriction. And this cycle highlighted the shift from an era of prosperity, the Jupiter energy, into a period of overextension and internal decay. And these are exactly similar themes to what we're seeing now as Pluto moves through Capricorn and into Aquarius, which again, like I said, is happening this month in November. So that's the parallel with the Roman Empire's fall. The US is seeing similar transits. Could we be witnessing, quote unquote, the fall of the empire? And I don't mean, again, I'm not spreading fear. It's about change, strains of structure and change of power and change of government. Saturn is also the planet of authority, as well as the planet of everything else I told you about. So when you have Pluto that's representing power, and Saturn representing authority, and Pluto representing death and dark to light and rebirth, and Saturn representing answering for your karma, you can see when you mix those two energies and apply it to what this means for a country overall, it's pretty clear. So I also mentioned there are similarities to the U.S. Revolution and the U.S. Civil War. Similarities in terms of what's happening now, and a very rare transits again, multiple transits as well, to what happened back then. So leading up to the American Civil War, leading up to the American Revolution, Uranus, the planet of chaos, of sudden change, of disrupting the status quo, and Pluto, the planet of power, of death, of rebirth, of transmuting dark to light, were in a square. A square, if you've seen my other videos, is an aspect of friction. It's an aspect that brings struggles and obstacles and lessons. But in the end, these are supposed to lead to something good, even if it doesn't seem that way at the time. But there's free will here in how we want to use and transmute and alchemize that energy. So, leading up to the American Revolution, Uranus and Pluto were in a square, stirring up that revolutionary energy and sparking the fight for independence. We also had Saturn, and again, that's the planet for those new to astrology. That's the planet of authority, of government, of bringing order to chaos, of responsibility, of commitment. We had Saturn opposing, which is another frictional aspect, Pluto, which creates a clash between authority and transformation. These are the same energies that we're echoing today, especially because we had a Saturn-Pluto aspect. It was a conjunction. Conjunction is when the planets touch. That happened in 2020 on January 12th. And when we're talking about these big, slow-moving generational planets of Saturn and Pluto, something like 2020 is considered close. It's when you have an aspect, a conjunction that happens in that time, its energy is playing out for years, even when the planets start to move again, because these are such slow-moving planets. So Pluto, death, power, rebirth. Saturn, restructuring, authority, government, conjunction, touching. This happened January 12th, 2020, right before the pandemic broke out, which told the astrologers that the pandemic was not just about health, and that the world was not going to be the same. The world's not going to be the same after a Saturn-Pluto conjunction. And astrologers knew on January 12th, when the news started coming out of the pandemic, that what was going to unfold was an event that would mark the beginning of a new cycle. A Saturn-Pluto conjunction only occurs every few decades. And when they meet, important structures in our lives are going to be torn down and rebuilt. And so this is something that's energy is still playing out and affecting what's happening to governments, not just in the US, but around the world today. And this is one other similarity that is similar with what was happening during the US Revolution. US Revolution, like we said, had a Saturn to Pluto aspect, except that was an opposition. So similarly, right now, we're being prompted to really big systematic restructuring and reevaluation of freedoms, power, and government. Now, during the U.S. Civil War, we're also seeing similar transits between the two. In 1850, during the 1850s, there was a powerful Uranus-Pluto conjunction. And again, Uranus, the planet of chaos. Pluto, at this point, I think you've memorized it, Hades, death, rebirth, power. They touched. They had an aspect. Aspect is an energetic exchange. I like to nubify say it. And that set the stage for the Civil War. That conjunction brought freedom struggles to the forefront and called for systematic change and really mirrored the themes of today's collective awakening. Saturn squaring Pluto in the early 1860s also added pressure on the deep-seated societal issues. So the US right now is revisiting these very similar energies during its Pluto return on top of that. So we're having the Pluto return. The world had this Saturn-Pluto conjunction. And then we are also having aspects we're seeing when it comes to Pluto with other planets and also with Uranus. And then we're also having Pluto shift signs. So all of this is talking about unresolved divisions, and a demand for transformation, and hints at some kind of either restructure or collapse. Again, don't want to scare, but it's really nothing bad. It just is what it is, right? And we as a society and individuals can use free will to determine how it ends. There's also similar transits when it comes to World War I and World War II. During World War I, Uranus and Pluto again were in an aspect. They were squaring each other. A square is that tense, challenge-based aspect. So that brought really intense power struggles and global upheaval. And this mirrors the recent Uranus-Pluto aspects we've had over the past decade, especially between 2012 to 2015, which began to trigger the shift in how we view authority and independence. And again, like I said, these are planets that have multi-hundred-year cycles, so we're still considered in the effect even if it happened back in 2015. Additionally, Saturn conjunct Neptune in the era of World War I created a tension between harsh reality and idealism, very similar to our recent Saturn-Neptune alignments, where collective dreams were finally challenged by practical limitations, and collective ideals over idealism of certain things, of certain policies maybe even, were challenged by practical enforcement of those. In World War II, Saturn and Pluto squared each other again in 1939, marking a very intense global struggle over power and control. And remember, Pluto is also death, right? Pluto is also darkness, trauma, corruption, dark to light. And Saturn and Pluto squaring here is a square that sees a lot of a very high level of death. When these two are activated, you kind of know that the global death rates as a percentage are going to go up at the time of the conjunction. At the time of the aspect. And so we saw that in World War II. Where else did I tell you earlier that Saturn and Pluto squared each other? That Saturn and Pluto aspected, that means had like an energetic exchange, you could say, each other. That happened in 2020. That was the last time Saturn and Pluto had an aspect. It was a conjunction in 2020. This is a very rare thing, and same thing in 2020 going up to the years following. The global death rate, and you can even Google this, the global death rate shot up, partly because of the pandemic, and then in this year and last year, because of certain G words I'm not gonna say on here because I don't want to get shadow banned so soon, that played out around the world, where we saw massive levels, sadly, of death. And so this really marks an intense global struggle over power and control. And like I said, we saw this conjunction in 2020, so we're still at the phases where it's still playing out. And this is a rare and potent aspect that signals a new era. Just like World War II, this is a alignment that's highlighting the dismantling and restructuring of power structures around the world. So, to TLDR, the US is in the midst of its Pluto return, a rare cycle that brings intense transformation to governmental systems, to power, and to society as a whole. It forces us to confront concepts of power, of authority, of darkness, of bringing darkness to light, and what happens as within, so without, as above, so below. What happens on a collective level is amplified and affected by what's happening individually, because it's linked. So a lot of this has to happen within internal confrontations individually for us, and that reflects on a whole. So the US having its Pluto return, starting it, let's say, because remember, this is 200 plus year cycle for Pluto. So the US starting its Pluto return in 2022 in the sign of Capricorn, the sign that also represents authority and structure and government, mirrors the revolutionary cycles experienced during the US Civil War and the US Revolution. And this transformation is deepened by the recent Saturn to Pluto conjunction, which echoes the themes of restructuring, accountability, and karmic reckoning seen during historical periods of war and revolution. We had Saturn to Pluto and Pluto to Uranus aspects in both world wars. And so right now, that's what we're seeing right now. These rare aspects that happen every few decades are happening all at once in very similar and very close time frames. In each of these cycles, We see recurring themes of power struggles, societal upheaval, and the potential for profound rebirth. Today's transits, especially the US Pluto return, and this kind of faster transit of Mars moving to Leo, which is kind of acting like a combustion, mirrors these historical transformations, suggesting that we're on the cusp of yet again another major societal awakening and a potential kind of reformation of power on a global scale. So the key lesson here is that we're being called to embrace change, no matter how disruptive it feels at the moment. It might feel chaotic, you might feel scared, no matter what side you're on. One side might be feeling scared of the election results, one side might be feeling scared of the other side's reaction to the results. Again, I'm keeping this purely bigger picture and objective here, not bringing personal opinion into this, just objectively as an astrologer. No matter how disruptive and chaotic it might feel for you in terms of what's going to play out, what's already playing out, Pluto and Saturn are here to teach us that growth as a society, as an individual, is tied, and it often requires hardship, letting go of the past, learning from the past, transmuting dark to light, confronting hard truths, confronting failures, confronting secrets, confronting corruption, confronting what's hidden in the dark, and confronting our own. There's Aquarius is also bringing this energy, and Pluto is bringing this energy of confronting our own beliefs of what we thought was really in front of us versus what really is in front of us, and how do we dismantle and rework that. The stars right now are really suggesting that we are on, and when I say stars, I mean like the celestial elements overall, that we are on the brink of a new era of very, very deep societal and collective change. A time when we can choose to create a world that values equality, freedom, collective progress, honesty, lack of corruption, integrity, and truth. For predictions, if you couldn't tell, now 36 minutes in this video, what I'm predicting, I see massive potential shifts, not just in the US leadership, and I'm not just talking about who won the election. I mean in terms of the structure of leadership. But I see shift perhaps on a global level in terms of government and authority and leadership. There is a rise, there's going to be a rise. All that's happening right now, all that's been happening, amplified since 2020, is pushing the collective. This is part of, if you follow me on Instagram, I talk a lot, and I've talked a lot about the shift in collective consciousness, the mass awakening, or as others call it, the age of Aquarius. I'm going to make a separate video about the astrological perspective of the age of Aquarius. What does that mean when people say it? What do people mean when they're talking about the global awakening? But what we're seeing right now, what's happening now in the US and what's happening now on the entire world stage, and what's been playing out really with the catalyst year of 2020 and this year, the catalyst year of 24, 23 was also catalyst year, and 2025 is going to be a big one, is all to do with this global awakening of humanity. And the aim here is a rise in collective consciousness as people push back against outdated systems, push back against corruption, push back against injustice, push back against division, and seek more community-centered ways of living. So expect as well massive technology revolutions right before the sudden peak and rise in AI. If you followed me on I have multiple Instagrams, so it's a bit confusing, but if you followed me on the coaching and writing Instagram, Heal with Words by Petra, I talked about how there was going to be a massive shift in AI before that happened. So this is also part of what we're seeing with a lot of Aquarian related shifts. Big technological revolutions and shifts in how we interact with each other, but I predict that's also going to play a part too in how society and power is structured on a global level. A lot of these energies are emphasizing the importance of innovation when it comes to this restructuring. So in conclusion, this isn't about fear. So I do not want any fear when it comes to this video. It's really just about knowing what's coming and seeing also, on a selfish note, showing you the power of astrology and why astrology for so long was used by the leaders of the world. But now as these play out and as the media is going to start playing things that will create more division and more chaos, and you will feel it, because you're also going to be called on an individual level to confront your own demons and to play a part in confronting society's demons. Where are you holding back your truths? Where are your actions not aligning with what you really believe in? Where are you not standing up for the underdog? Where are you not standing up for what you believe in and not speaking your truth? Where are you not embodying who you want to be? And where are you not playing a part in creating the society where you want to be? Where are you leading more into division and leading more into repression and leading more into authority figures having more power and you being disempowered? So it's going to ask you to confront it within yourself, and all of us to come together to change it in society as a whole. This period is marking one of the most transformative times truly in modern history. We are in an era of global awakening where humanity is being asked to rise above fear, to align with our higher values, and to stand together. And as cliche as I know I'm going to sound, the answer truly comes back to love. But, there's a time to be passive and being acting in integrity and in the vibration of love does not mean being passive. Sometimes it requires us to face and transmute the darkness and to stand up for what we believe in and to restructure. And so being passive does not equate being or acting in love. Action is required. And that's what a lot of these transits are about. So no matter what side anyone is on, this isn't about that. This is about a time to come together, to see the big picture, and to use the energy to create something better, and to ask us, how did we get to this point? This point where there's a lot of division, there's a lot of corruption, where people are so swayed on both sides with the media, with the rhetoric, where we are so disempowered as individuals. How did we get to this point, and what are we going to do to make sure it doesn't happen again? What are we going to do to make sure that there's no longer single issue voters or voting happening, that there's no longer a two-party system that is sticking us with maybe candidates that we feel like on all sides are not aligned, or that are being influenced by perhaps darker powers that do not have the best intentions? How did we get here, and what are we going to do to make sure it doesn't happen again? Okay, so remember that we're all in this together, and the cosmos is always guiding us. So even though things in the next few years, things right now, no matter what side you're on, and I don't like that there are sides, even though they seem chaotic, this is happening to facilitate a global awakening. And in the end, we can and will get through this as a society and come together, and that is part of the answer. But just like often the most beautiful things in life are created after friction and tension, it's the same here. We have to go through a period of hardship and friction and shock and chaos to learn these lessons. What's that quote about a peaceful society creates weak men create a chaotic society, and then a chaotic society creates strong men? That's kind of saying that we have to go through some of this chaos in order to create a peaceful society again. Oh yeah, I didn't close the loop. And then strong men create a peaceful society. So this is kind of the cycle that we're in right now. Thank you for joining me on this journey. I hope this was informative and gave deeper understanding to how this all connects in the bigger picture. I'm going to make another video talking more about the global impact of the awakening of humanity and what that means and what's the age of Aquarius and all of that. This video was focusing more on the US, the election, what I see the US shifting towards right now, and how it will tie to the global impact of humanity. And just as a reminder, again, it was purely objective without any of my personal opinion, but with my personal opinion as an astrologer of what's coming. And these are the tools that allowed me to see what's going to happen now, and what I've seen was coming from the start of the pandemic. I knew the pandemic was going to start bringing global shifts. Stay tuned, because later on I'm going to have episodes about discussions I've had with people with the shamans around the world that predicted other things happening, like the current conflict, quote unquote conflict in the Middle East, and really what I see happening astrologically that's backed by astrology over there and on a mass level. I hope this video has been informative. I try and give the details so people can learn, but I don't want it to be so overwhelming with all the knowledge, so I hope to kind of bridge that. And I really want to show too how complicated, convoluted, complex, deep and profound and powerful astrology is, so that many people can understand why the leaders of the world have used it for millennium, for so long in history, throughout all of history, and why I think a lot of the powers that be in the modern world don't want the masses to know about the power of astrology. I hope you've enjoyed this video that shows the historical parallels and explains to you what's coming. And in the end, I want you to again know that it's not here to spread fear. Stay grounded. If you're grounded and you keep looking at the bigger picture and reconnecting to seeing the world, as I like to say, seeing the world through the eyes of God or whatever your higher power is, and connecting again to acting from a place of love and unity, and belief that all the shifts you're experiencing internally and externally right now are leading to something bigger and greater, but we can't stay passive. That's what it's saying. We can't stay passive. And, things have to crumble in order to be rebuilt, but it doesn't mean that our lives individually are going to completely crumble or be destroyed or something. Okay. I'm trying very hard to leave this on a positive note, but I hope you've enjoyed this video. Again, this was as a result of the poll on Instagram. This is a new channel, so any comment, subscription really, 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 truly helps me. I cannot tell you how much I really, really appreciate it. I'm also going to be launching this as a podcast. Maybe you're even listening to this now when it's in podcast form. So stay tuned for that. And stay tuned you can also see these updates on my multiple Instagram pages, but I'm going to be launching an Instagram page by tomorrow. So while probably you're listening to this when it's launched, there will be an Instagram page that's just for the astrology content. So if you want to have more of a say of what videos get made, what I make predictive astrology and forecasting videos on, follow me on Instagram, subscribe to this video, let me know in the comments if you've enjoyed this, what your thoughts are, if it's what you expected, if this is all so new to you and you're so impressed, literally anything. I'm also running, since I just launched this channel, a giveaway for a 60-minute astrology deep dive analysis for you to use for anything, whether it's career, love, or location astrology, or just to get to know your natal chart, your life's path, your life's purpose. And all you have to do is subscribe and leave a comment. It can be a comment about absolutely anything, and that gets you one entry. And any additional comment after that will count as multiple entries. So if you want to win that, please subscribe and leave a comment, but also that would just help me so much. So thank you so much. I really hope you've enjoyed this, and stay tuned for more.